Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to start the colour work on a still life project that I've been meaning to do for ages. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that that's a strange one for me because quite often I'm working from photo reference. But the guys on my Patreon channel have been asking for a still life for a while, and I also just wanted to treat myself to something different to work on, something that I don't often get a chance to do, which is working from life. So if you want to work along, I have also released a couple of other videos to start this series off. The first one will show you how to set up your own still life at home, so you don't have to work along from my photo reference of this still life. You can learn how to set up your own still life at home and work from that. The second video then takes you through how to actually go about creating your line drawing from life, gives you lots of tips to get a reasonably accurate line drawing before you start the colour work. Now this part starts the colour work, the part that I always look forward to most, and I'm working in soft pastel. I'm using mostly Unison pastels like I do with all of my work, and here on screen I will show you the colour list of the colours that I've used in this project so that you can gather together a similar palette from what you have in your own collection. Also, if you would like to work along with me on this still life, you can download the high resolution images from my Patreon channel, and I'll add links to all of that in the description below. And if you want to work along using similar materials to me, I am using Pastelmat Paper. It's the light brown colour, and I've cut this down to 19 by roughly 12 inches. So it's quite a good size, not too small so that the detail won't be too difficult to achieve. And I'm going to try and not go into a huge amount of detail in this to really go for a bit more painterly style. And if you do enjoy this, then do check out all of my other videos here on YouTube. Please do hit the subscribe button and show my channel a bit of support. And also, as I mentioned before, consider checking out my Patreon channel where you will find my full catalogue of in-depth tutorials and lots more guidance if you're looking to learn more in soft pastel. But I hope that you enjoy this. So the first thing that I'm going to do probably is to block in a bit of the background. I want it to be quite dark back here, really set off that lovely vibrant yellow fabric. And I'm going to treat this just like I would with any other painting, work from the background to the foreground. So I'm going to tackle the fabric first. Try and get that looking a little 3D before I make a start on any of the objects. So just using a very dark Unison pastel here just to quickly do a bit of blocking in. It's not my darkest black. I will bring my darkest black into this because I'd really like back here to have a lot of contrast. But I don't want it to be just plain flat black either, so. And I also noticed in one of the photo references that I took of this, just as I was planning out the composition and looking at it through a viewfinder, I noticed a little bit of light coming from the top, casting some blue colours from the top. So I might even include that just to give a sense of some light coming in. So perhaps with a little bit of the lilac colour that I'm planning to use later on in the composition. Just lighten this top area a little bit, create a bit of a gradient coming from light to dark. So this is always an area I can come back to later on if I want to adjust how dark it is, and really help to set things off a bit more in terms of the contrast, because you can see that I can still go a lot more black on this. Just creating a little bit of the darkest shadow down this side. But the main thing I'm looking forward to working on is this lovely yellow fabric. And it's really dramatically lit, so there are lots of colours within the shadows, not just yellow, as you're about to see. So the first thing I start to look for within the fabric are some of the very darkest shadows. Now I've roughly sketched in some of the folds of the fabric just to get me started. So I'm just looking for the very darkest cast shadows. Of course, remembering that our light source is coming from the right. So everything's going to have the darkest shadows to the left. So even though it's a bright yellow fabric, you've got to be prepared for some surprisingly dark colours sometimes. Even when painting light coloured things, you've got to really look for the tonal value of the colours that you're seeing, as it's not always going to be bright colours just because it's a bright subject matter. Especially in this case where I've tried to create really dark light and shade and a lot of contrast within the picture. And don't be afraid to experiment with your colour when you're using soft pastel. You can very easily go over the top of things again if you feel that it's not the right colour when you first apply it. And that's probably what I'm going to have to do a little bit here, just experiment as I go. Really try to find the correct both tonal value and the temperature of the colour as well, so how warm or cool it is. And for me, I'm used working from photo reference, and it's a little bit easier when you're working from photo reference to decipher the tonal value and how warm or cold the colour is. You really see it flattened into 2D. So it's a bit different working from life. You've got to really test your eyes and try to look for the colours that you're actually seeing, not what you think should be there. So I'm seeing lots of green in the folds of this fabric. So I won't even bring in yellow yet. Just want to deal with the darkest shadow areas first. I'm seeing lots of greens in the shadows. I'm also seeing quite a lot of brown and orange, but definitely lots of green. So just looking for the shapes of the folds. Really just roughly blocking in at this stage. Any of those biggest shadow areas. So spending a lot of time just looking, observing what I can see. And as well as the shadows that the creases are making, you can also see quite a big cast shadow right across all of the creases coming from the objects themselves. And I want to also think about the effect that those are having on the colours. So really just figuring out the complexity of the creases. The nice thing about still life is that I don't have to worry about getting it 100% accurate. Normally when I'm working on commissioned portraits and things like that, The pressure is more on me to make sure that I get it very accurate. Someone commissioning a portrait, more than likely they want it to be photorealistic or at least capture a really good likeness. So in this case I don't have to worry quite so much about that. You can have a lot more artistic license in this sort of project, which is lovely. If you can hear some snuffling and snorting in the background, it's not me. That is one of my dogs in having a bit of a roly-poly on the mat. I've usually got some kind of strange sound effects in my videos. And bits of scratching noises. She likes to dig on the mat. She doesn't so much like to dig in the garden, but she likes to dig on things that she can't actually go anywhere on. Not sure what the logic is there. So yeah, if you hear some strange noises in the background, that is what's going on. It's usually pretty difficult in this house to record audio, let alone try to paint and record audio at the same time. But I will do my best. So every colour apart from yellow so far. I will get the yellow at some point, but I'm really dealing with all of those shadows first of all. Then hopefully when I do come in with the vibrant yellows, all of this will make more sense. So really just studying what I can see in front of me. Not in a hurry to make lots of marks quickly. Speed is not the key here. Really just trying to observe and take my time. So shadows are definitely one of my favorite things to paint. You can find so much color in there. Just looking at the lovely shadow being cast on the fabric here by the tea canister. So much warmth in that shadow. So again, not even using yellow yet for a yellow fabric. So let's bring in a little bit of yellow now to start to get a feel of where the highlights go, where we're actually going to see some of that vibrant yellow colour. So of course down this right side, being hit most by the light. And my whole aim with this painting is to not really go for photorealism. I'm so used to working in such a tight, controlled way, and it really is my desire with this to loosen up a bit, have a bit of fun, play with colour. And of course the trick with Pastelmat is to get a few layers on the paper before things start to blend nicely. So these first layers are inevitably going to look a bit rough. Then the hope is once I get a couple of layers on the paper, I can really start to move things around, blend it nicely. And I will, as you'll see later, pick up some tools to help me blend. I particularly like the pan pastel tools for blending with, little sponge applicators. So each crease, I'm looking for the bright side of it where the light is hitting. And what I really like about soft pastel is the ability to build up these layers quite gradually and really let the colours start to do a bit of mixing on the paper. So I'm not always looking to put down the exact right colour first. Sometimes I want that colour to mix on the paper and show through the different layers that I've applied. Just using my smaller pieces of pastel when I need it to be a bit more precise, but again, I'm not worrying too much about being a bit messy. And I probably will pick up some pastel pencil later on when I'm working on some of the finer details on the objects. But I'm pretty sure that the majority of this fabric can be done just with the bigger pastels. Just for that looseness, the vibrance of the colours. So my number one priority in the first stages of anything that I'm painting, just to get the paper covered in, get those first layers on and blocked in. So I'm trying to be loose about that. But to also start to get a sense of the 3D-ness of the folds in the fabric. So it's definitely not easy working from life. If you're also working from life with your own still life setup, it's great practice for your compositional skills in the first place when you're setting up the still life. Then it's amazing practice for drawing from life. Really tests your skills and capturing something that's right in front of you. And then this part as well just really makes you analyze color, because no matter how good a photograph is, you can always see so much more color in life. So the colors right in front of you are always going to be that bit more intense and vibrant than a photo reference. So that's what I'm enjoying from this piece so far, because when I look at the photos that I took, and I've released some high resolution photographs on my Patreon channel. If you would like to have a go at this piece in particular, you can work right along with me using that photo reference. But I know that the colours I can see here in front of me are just that bit more vibrant. And that's what I'm going to really enjoy from this piece. Just the vibrance of what I can actually see in front of me. So I do love working from photo reference, and I do that for a lot of my commissioned work. but it's lovely to get an opportunity to work from life. So if you can already start to see how bringing in these two yellow tones is starting to make a little bit of sense of some of the other colours that I've used as shadow tones. Seems a bit crazy at the start, but really trust your eye and try to be a bit more bold with your colour choices. And now I've got a dog throwing herself into my foot. Clearly looking a treat. Oh, it is hard to keep nice, smooth, straight lines when you've got somebody kicking you in the foot. They seem to know when I hit record on a camera. Now's a good time. Let's go ask her for a treat. She'll definitely give us a treat. So what I'm trying to determine here as well, on some sides where the bright colours meet the shadow colours, it seems to happen in a very sharp line, and then in other places it's more softly blended into the shadow colours. So it's recognizing where you need a good sharp line and where you need to blend and create more of a gradient of colour. Usually that gradient of colour is on the left side of each pleat, and it's really showing the texture of the fabric, and that's definitely something that I want to try and include a little bit of the texture that I'm seeing from the fabric, so that it's not just all perfectly smooth. I'm just lightly blending all of that in as well as I go. I'm also making use of a little bit of my Henri Roché pastels along with my Unison pastels. Just recently got hold of a few of these lovely pastels, and I've got an unboxing video up here on my YouTube channel if you'd like to see a bit more about those. But this is really the first chance I've had to test some of it out, see what it's like in the mix with my other pastels. And they seem to go on really nicely and work really well along with my Unisons. They do have a bit of a different texture to the Unisons. I'm noticing now when trying them on Pastelmat that they are a little bit gritty, and actually the Unisons are extremely soft and buttery. That's something that I've always noticed about them, and I really like the Unisons for that buttery quality when you apply it to the paper. But I'm also noticing just how vibrant and pigmented the Rochés are. And that's the area that I'm using it in. These little vibrant orange highlights just down the shadow side of some of these pleats. That's where I'm really making use of that vibrance. So in these parts, just making sure that I pay attention to where the cast shadows are coming from the canister itself. And also just making a little bit of adjustment here. So as you start to get more blocked in with the pleats, the folds of the fabric, you start to get more of a sense of where everything goes. And it's never too late to make a few adjustments. So no matter what the subject matter, definitely one of my favorite things to paint is the play of light and shade. Just love looking at shadows and figuring that puzzle out. So I think I've got some of the pleats a little bit narrow in this section, which is sort of throwing me, but I'm just going to work on, not worry too much about it, because unless you're looking at a photograph or the actual composition, you're never going to know when the painting is finished. So I'm just going to make them a little bit narrower than they actually are in the composition, and that's fine. So don't worry about getting things exact. It's more important that you think of those color values. That to me is much more important in this challenge. And I think if I bring this dark shadow over just a little bit, it'll give me a bit more space for this extra fold that I seem to be missing. Because each of the folds sort of corresponds to a certain part of the objects in front of it. So I do want them to kind of sit correctly. So yeah, I can make this small adjustment perhaps. And you can see it's quite easy to adjust things as you go. They're not set in stone. If you haven't put your first layer down too heavily, then there's still a lot that you can do to change. If you feel that you need to move something later on. I think that's helped, just making this area a little broader, help me fit these couple of folds in. So now I can just come back in with that nice vibrant Roché and change the position of that vibrant little highlight. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this green is working out as my main shadow colour. I think that's a really nice contrast to the warmth of the yellow. Again, just thinking about how that shadow gets cast right across all of these pleats. So I'm really trying to simplify, break things down into more simple shapes that I can deal with. Dealing with the biggest of the shapes first and working your way down to the smaller detail. So bit by bit working my way across the folds, just trying to get them blocked in. Looking out for where any shadows are falling. So hopefully you can see that the more yellow I start to bring in, the more those really unusual color choices in the beginning start to make a bit more sense. You can really play with color that you can see in the shadows. Don't be afraid to try things out. So a little bit more complex here in the foreground. The folds are sitting nice and interestingly in front of the objects. And of course I really want the fabric to help the objects really pop out from the background. Again, lots of texture to the fabric. Trying to get a little hint of that in my marks. Really just looking at the flow and the curves. And everything that I'm doing still looks quite rough at this stage. It's quite a long process just to block it all in, as there's a lot going on. But once I do get that done, then hopefully I can start to refine what I'm doing here a little bit more. So as I keep saying, don't be afraid to go quite dark in the shadows. You really need it for that contrasted light, especially if you've got really dramatic lighting like this. Your shadow areas are always going to be a bit darker than you think. So really saving the brightest yellow to pick out some of the really light bits catching the most amount of light. So you don't want to ever come in straight away with your brightest highlight. So I will make use of these soft tools as I mentioned, especially in some smaller areas where your fingertips are just a little bit too big. So of course we've got a nice brown desk in front here as well. Probably just block in a little bit of that so that I can work the front of this fabric and where it meets the table. Just right back into the darkest shadow in there. So really trying to flatten the colours and simplify at this stage. As I said, I can do some refining and working at the gradient of colour, but really I'm just looking for the simple tonal value and get it locked in. So the best thing about still life is the fact that you can control the lighting. I'm not the quickest person in the world when it comes to painting or drawing. I like to take my time. And working plein air, for example, I still find that very difficult because you've got that ever-changing light while you work. So the thing that I like most about still life is that you can control the light. And you can have your still life set up for days on end as long as you're not painting anything perishable. So if you're looking to get into painting or drawing from life, personally I think still life is the best way to do it because you've still got a little bit of control over it. Still life objects don't move. And as I mentioned, you can control the lighting. So just working my way across the folds, studying each one. And you can see how this pigment covers over my earlier lines from the line drawing, no problem. So apologies for the loss of audio in this part. Not sure what happened. I took a break at that point, and when I came back I think I forgot to plug the mic back in here. So there's just a minute or two here where I've forgotten all about my audio. And the only thing that you're going to miss out on is that lovely scratchy noise of the pastels going onto the Pastelmat paper. But I do join back in pretty soon. I just added this little bit of audio on afterwards, just to say what I was saying while I was working on this part, and that being that I've sort of got into the swing of this now. I've figured out what colours to use in the shadow areas. The first part of any painting always takes a little bit of figuring out, so it's nice to get to the stage where you're feeling like you're just moving into autopilot a little bit. And that's the stage I'm at now, where I've kind of used some of the folds in the fabric just to figure out what I need to do, what colours I need to use. So coming back with fresh eyes, I did stop at this point for an actual cup of tea. I always feel like drinking tea, but especially when you're sitting staring at a lot of tea related items. So I stopped for a nice cup of tea at this point. And that's always a good idea. Take lots of breaks. Get a bit of a different perspective when you come back into the room. Quite often, if something's not going right, the best thing you can do is have a little break. So this green in particular, I've used lots of this green in the fabric, in those shadow parts of the folds. I really encourage you to play a bit with colour. I've taken so much inspiration from the Impressionist artists in particular. Their use of colour has always blown me away. And it's once you start going down the path of learning a little bit about colour theory that colour really starts to open up. That whole world of colour really does open up to you and expand your use of colour in your work. But definitely at this point of the painting, I'm feeling the benefits from getting a little distance from the painting and coming back to it with fresh eyes. So my advice also is to get some distance from the painting every once in a while. Stand up and walk away from it. Sometimes a loo break is just the thing to get you away from the piece and out of the room, give you a chance to come back and see it with fresh eyes. So make sure that you give yourself that fresh perspective on your artwork. Whether you're working from life or photo reference, whatever you're working on, it's always good to take a break. Take a progress picture on your phone so that you can look at it from further away. See how it looks in the reflection in a mirror. That's always a good trick as well. Just anything that will give you a fresh perspective on the work. Again, trying to use some of my marks to give the effect of the texture of the fabric. So I'm really not sure how long this demo will take. I don't really work on that many still lifes normally. And the last ones that I had a chance to work on were quite a few years ago. So it's not something that I'm used to doing. Let's just hope that I can fit this into a nice amount of time that if you want to work along, that it seems like quite a doable project. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm hoping that I get a chance to work on some more just like this. It's been fun right from the beginning actually, just getting to set up the still life, have a think about what objects I would like to paint. And my advice is to go for something that maybe means something to you in your house. Pick some objects that have meaning to you, or just objects that you particularly like the shapes of. In this case, it's my love of tea, combined with those nice geometric shapes, because I do particularly like the shape of the teapot and the cup. I'd love to paint some plants too sometime, but I sort of went for the geometric shapes that these make, thinking that they'll be a little bit more simple than nature's organic shapes. There's something quite nice and definite about their shapes. And I also really like the reflections, the shine of them. That really appeals. So again, that lovely vibrant Roché. Just using their lovely orange. Some of those little edges, they're in the shadows. Just picking out some real vibrant colour. So this area over here, really quite in the shadows. Not nearly so much light reaching the yellows over here. And of course I want to give the effect of how this bends over the edge of the desk. I always love that within a still life, when you get something in the foreground that really looks like it's coming out towards you and draping over the front of the composition. So although the soft pastel covers over all of my line work quite well, I can still see a good bit of the line for all of the objects later on. So the main thing that I think I may have to do once I get this blocked in is to go back over this and perhaps darken some of my darkest values. When I stood up from this earlier and had a look from a distance, even before I get my lighter values in. I think in some of those darkest shadow areas I'm going to have to go a bit darker still. So that's one good reason to get a bit of distance from the piece. Really assess how much darker or lighter you need to go in certain areas. So for example, in some of these very darkest of creases here, just using that really dark Unison CB1 this is, and it's about as dark as they do without it being black, so it's still got a bit of brown to it. And there are definitely some areas where I need that dark contrast, especially in around some of the objects here, because you're going to want them to really pop out from the composition. Things like that will become a little easier as well to judge once I start to actually get some of the objects in. And start to see where I need to darken perhaps some of the shadows around the base of the objects. But really trying to treat each little fold and valley of the fabric as something very 3D. Using the shadows to try and describe the 3D shape of what I'm seeing. And you probably just heard a bit of barking there. That's one of my other dogs. And that one likes to bark randomly at nothing. So he's also wonderful to have around when you're trying to record audio. have quite a random collection of animals. Each one has its own quirks. So really not a lot of this yellow colour that I can come into this area with. Very small amount of light reaching in here. So I'm still a little bit undecided what to do with the desk area. So I'll not bother too much with that at the moment, just carry on getting the fabric blocked in. Sort of making a lot of decisions about this piece as I go. Don't really have a game plan. But I'm enjoying how colourful it is. How much colour you can get into just a yellow piece of fabric. And I'm enjoying making use of these big sticks in a more loose and painterly way. You really do get the best of both worlds with soft pastel. You can get tight, refined detail if you want, but then you can also use them loosely, block in large areas really quickly. It really is an awesome medium. So far it's a lot of green, and I will tone a lot of it down, but I'm really just trying to look at it in a simplified way and get most of the paper covered at this stage. So I'm getting close to the point where I've got at least got all of the fabric covered in pastel. So blocking in stage done. Then I can really start to adjust my tonal values right across the whole piece. But at this stage I'm quite pleased that it at least starts to resemble a 3D piece of fabric. So just darkening down some of those darkest creases towards the top of them. And beginning to tone down the greens a little, bring a little bit of warmth into those. I certainly don't want them to look just as green as this. So I'm really starting to bring some warmth into those cool green areas. And really using the shape or the direction of my marks to kind of describe the flow of the fabric and the grain or texture of the fabric. on this side instead of that lovely vibrant Roché orange. I'm using this lovely limey sort of very yellowy green. So further over into the shadows, a bit less warmth over here. Really just trying to put as much colour in this as possible. So this is the end of part 1. I've split this project up into 3 parts for the colour pastel work, and I do hope that you'll join back in with part 2, where I'll continue and finish the fabric and make a start on some of those lovely objects. Thanks for watching this first part. Please do join in with part 2.